So, last week I didn't watch the second episode of Tales from the Territories, but I did do that this week or yesterday before I watched the newest episode, so I watched back-to-back episodes. And I will say this about the episode on Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman's feud. It did touch upon a lot of things we pretty much already knew about, and some things we didn't know about, when it led into certain events. And I thought it did a very good job of, kind of giving us an idea of what we already knew, but adding more to it that we didn't know. Like, like for example, Andy Kaufman showing up unexpectedly, to I think Jimmy Hart's house where Lawler was at, and then working out some kind of an idea for an angle because Hart and Lawler were in an angle at that time. And, they pretty much, decided, okay, what if, it's Kaufman under the bandages and not Lawler, not Hart, because Hart had been burned in a cage match. It was against Lawler. It was one of those cage matches back then, and still gets utilized sometimes today, but mostly back then it was kind of an old school like wrestling cage where it was mostly barbed wire, or basically chicken wiring surrounded by a wooden cage. And Hart was basically flamethrown, or basically given a fire in the face by Lawler. So he went around always being bandaged up and everything. So, like I said, Andy decided to show up unexpectedly because he loved wrestling so much. He wanted to contribute to the business that, basically he decided along with Lawler and Hart, let's come up with this idea to keep this going, because this angle with Lawler was something that was, just going and going no matter what the circumstances. They showed footage and reenactments from the Letterman situation, and how Lawler had to be, after the slap, had to be, taken to the backstage area to the dressing room and then brought back out because Letterman wanted him to come back out, and hopefully Kaufman would come back out. And they showed the footage from that, the reenactments. Lawler even said that after that was all said and done, security guy took him to a separate elevator because, Kaufman's didn't go all the way to the top, if you know what we mean. They did talk about the fact that Kaufman loved to, really just, keep kayfabe alive as best he could. Not just from what we've already known about, him paying for the ambulance, him paying for the hospital stay and all that. But he wanted to keep it alive even in Hollywood, around people he knew. But what happened was, the kayfabeness only lasted to a certain extent, from what I understand. Because apparently Kaufman, who was a star on Taxi back in the early 80s, he wanted to perform with the neck brace on to kind of continue selling what happened, but the director was like, no, you take that on and we'll give you your walking papers and you're out. So Kaufman, obviously not wanting to lose his job, took the neck brace off according to the reenactment and just went on to act without it. And I think Brian Zane even touched upon this in his video he did recently on Andy Kaufman and, in his feud with Lawler and stuff. And what happened is that Kaufman tried to explain to Tony Danza, who was his co-star at the time on Taxi, the situation, and Danza, who's a former professional boxer, basically said, well, I'll go down to Memphis and beat the hell out of Lawler myself. Basically that's what he kind of alluded he would do. And Lawler decided, for the benefit, just to drop it. I guess they decided that off screen, Kaufman got better, and there we go. But basically, like I said, they talked about things we may have known and didn't know. Like, for example, when Kaufman was aligned with Hart, Hart would act like a babysitter for him, will basically drive him around. And one of the things they would do during Kaufman's, basically his last run in Memphis, was they would stop at Graceland. They would stop in front of the gates at Graceland, and Kaufman would sit down in front of the gates and just meditate. He would just meditate there for a little bit, and then he decides to take a piece of chalk and write his name on the fence. And Hart basically said he didn't have the guts, or didn't, want to, I guess didn't really want to tell Andy, hey, this is gonna wash off with the rain and all that. Or I don't know if he did say that to him. I gotta go back and rewatch. But Andy just took the piece of chalk and wrote his name on the fence. Whether or not Hart told him it was gonna wash off with the rain, again, I gotta rewatch it. But yeah, he did that. He even did meditation before his matches, as well. So what happened, though, is Andy showed up one night, and this is where it kind of got a little sad and somber. He showed up one night from New York to Tennessee, and Hart started noticing that he was coughing, and Jimmy kind of kind of equaled it up to, maybe because of the changing of the weather from New York to Tennessee, cold to hot, you got a head cold. Little did he know that it was actually lung cancer that was causing Andy to cough a lot. And this was even further examined, or further proven, when Lawler, who had his Jerry Lawler show, interviewed Andy, and Andy was coughing through that, and Andy was there. He was in person and all that, but it made it look like he wasn't. So anyway, Andy, after the interview, Andy goes to Lawler and says, I'm sorry for coughing so much doing that, and then tells him he's been diagnosed with lung cancer. So, yeah, there was, like I said, there was some things they told us about that we already knew. They just added more to it, some details that, at times left out, depending on who would do a documentary or whatever on the situation. So they went into a full detail of the whole feud, on how it came nationwide media, from the Letterman thing. They even said that Letterman had just started around that time, and then that moment not only is looked at as one of the top 100 moments in the history of television, but that moment, that incident, that slap between Lawler and Kaufman, put late night, the Late Show with David Letterman on the map. It helped really elevate him to that next level. So overall, I thought the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler episode, which was the second episode of the Tales of the Territories, I thought did a great job. The reenactments were done very well. I mean, the person kind of was almost spot on when it came to Andy Kaufman, but yeah, I thought it was good. Like I said, it added more depth to what we knew, and even, mentioned some things we didn't know. And I can't say any more about it than, you need to see it. You need to see it and everything. Because there are things that we didn't know. We didn't really know that much about. Like, for example, when Lawler was shooting Man on the Moon with Jim Carrey, the Andy Kaufman biography, Andy's actual parents, his dad, came up to Lawler and said, we've basically admitted, because I guess everything had been patched up because they were pretty much clued in on things long ago, but they pretty much admitted that they hated Lawler for the longest time because of what happened to Andy, making it look like his neck was really broken, saying the things he did about, Lawler saying some of the things he did about Andy, and stuff. That even surprised that even surprised Jeff Jarrett a bit too when he found out. He said, "Well, like really, because nobody, nobody knew at that time. For the longest time that they did hold a grudge against Lawler for the whole incident before they were clued in on what was really going on. So yeah, the episode's really good, and I highly recommend watching it. But then we get the new episode, which is AWA Body Slams in the Midwest. Oh, Body Slams in the Heartland. And this, of course, based on the AWA. The figureheads they had here, because for Andy Kaufman, they had the same figureheads as the week before. They had Jeff Jarrett, Jerry Jarrett, Detrimental, Jimmy Hart, and Jerry Lawler. In the round table here, a round table in the second episode, just like the first one. And here for the third episode, they had Diamond Dallas Page, they had Greg Gagne, they had Jumping Jim Jumping Jim Bunzil, they had Medusa, they had Ken Patera. And this episode I thought was really good. Really, really good, because they talked about things in this episode that I don't think WWE even touched upon when they did their history of the AWA. And some of the things they talked about was surprising. Some of the moments, honestly. For example, they touch on Mad Dog Vachon, Luna Vachon's father, and and how wild and crazy he was, right? Well, they touched upon the fact that one of the ways, they got the wrestlers from, because they did say that the AWA covered a lot of territory. From Minnesota to Chicago to, I think, Nevada, California, stuff like that, Wisconsin. So they touched upon that. And what was interesting about it is the fact that when they would travel, they bought this small plane which could seat about 12 people, but because you had wrestlers, you can only do about 8 at most. So they touched upon, them buying this little biplane that would get them from one area to another. And they talked about Mad Dog Vachon when it came to this. And they touched upon how he was supposed to meet his fiance's parents. The night he was also competing, so he wanted to go on first. So Greg, who was also kind of in charge of booking, said, "Okay, we'll put you on first." And what happened is Vachon got a hold. Let's just put it this way: he got a hold of a ton of alcohol. From beers to hold on for a sec. From beers to whiskey and stuff like that. Brunzil even said that he was kind of like the pharmacist for a lot of the guys, because he would have a bunch of pills and stuff on him, like uppers and things. And he would supply them with these pills to help them out, like relax them, keep them up, stuff like that. So what happened is he gave some to Vachon. He kept him up, helped him, go out to have his match and everything, and then go meet the relatives. But it was in between all this that he drank, like I said, some beer in the back. He drank some whiskey on, when he was on the plane, before the plane. He drank some wine and stuff with the relatives. And he basically, long story short, he got wasted badly. he got wasted badly to the point when he showed up to get on the flight to the next town. His shirt was all covered in barbecue sauce and stuff because, like I said, they went out and ate. Him and his fiance and the relatives, where they had some drinks, and pretty much he was gone. He was pretty much out of it. And they decided to give him some more pills. I can't think of the names of the pills that they gave him, but basically they gave him more pills to go along with what he was drinking, because I think he had, according to the reenactment, he had like a bottle of wine or whiskey on him. And he basically was so just out of it to the point that, you would think, okay, somebody that drinks that much and even takes those kind of pills, he's just going to pass out, fall asleep, no big deal until you get to the next town. This SOB, and I say it with all due respect, Lord, this SOB decides, just because he is so out of his mind because of all that he's taken, decides to open the side door on the plane while they're in mid-flight. Yeah, he decides to open the side door while they're in mid-flight, and this causes the plane to go like from straight to whoa, and on all the guys, all they're doing is like they're just minding their own business, like they're playing cards, reading books, something like that. All of a sudden they get this jolt, and they're like, "What is going on?" They're thinking, "Are we crashing? Did we get hit by something?" And then the pilot has to say, "Somebody open up the side door," or something like that. Or I think the pilot informed the side door is open, and you look in the back, and it's Mad Dog Fashawn, and he's just hanging out of the door like this, just as carefree as can be, to the point that, the pilot's telling him, get him back in here. But, but they can't. Well, they try, but they can't really do it successfully at first. And Mad Dog, what he's doing is he's taking all the empty beer bottles, empty alcohol bottles, cans, tossing them out of the plane onto the, and you gotta imagine, they're in mid-flight, they're like way up there, and he's just tossing all this stuff down to fall into the ground, fall into the fields, around the Midwest, right? But he's not just tossing that, he's tossing wrestlers' duffel bags with the wrestling gear. He is just out of his mind. He's just out of his mind. To the point that when they finally did get him in, they couldn't shut the door, and the pilot had to make an emergency landing, in a nearby small airport. And then the police showed up along with fire engines and all that, and they were going to arrest Fashawn, and they said, you got one or two options. We arrest him, book him, jail him, or you get him, take him out of here. So they chose option B, and they decided to basically tie him up to a chair here until they got to the nearest location. And Fashawn, he's just out of his mind and everything, and he's telling the wrestlers, you don't take me back with you, I'm going to, blankety blank kill you guys, or I'm going to hurt you guys, I'm going to hunt you guys down, kill you guys. And then he's getting tied up, and he's like, oh, fuck, F you guys, because he's not happy being tied up, but it's for his own good. Well, they finally take off and get to their next destination. Yeah, Mad Dog Fashawn lived up to his name even outside of the ring, especially when given plenty of alcohol, plenty of pills. It just, you got to see the episode, but it was a wild reenactment. And I think anybody that's followed the sport for so long as a fan and historically can definitely agree that this definitely matches up to who Mad Dog was. But that wasn't even the that wasn't even the craziest of it. No. They touch upon Medusa, and Medusa's grateful to Vern for giving her an opportunity to get her started officially in this business in a big way. She even said her first check was, at the time, you gotta imagine, this is like the mid to late 80s. Her first check was $800. She said she had never been paid that much ever. So anyway, she's getting a call because they want to book her in a program with Sherry Martel, who is managing Playboy Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. And what happened is, Doug, Buddy, and Sherry have their own car. And Medusa has to ride with all the other guys in another car, and these guys are high and everything, and just to, mess with her and everything, they roll up the windows and even tape the handles to the windows so that she can't reach over and roll it down. I don't know, and she's just inhaling all this, weed and all the smell and all that. But what's interesting is they get to a Dairy Queen, which they were surprised even was, in any close proximity of where they were driving. So Sherry goes inside, gets all these blizzards, as they call them, or gets all the blizzards, and then as they're riding in back, because Medusa's riding with the guys in the car that's in back of Sherry's car, and Sherry decides to pop out of the sunroof and just start tossing the blizzard shakes, at the window and everything, just to mess with them and all that. And while they're riding, and while this is happening, they're kind of like riding side by side, trying to get by them to avoid this. And they see Doug Summers, I think was it Doug Summers or Playboy Buddy Rose? One of them. No, it was Summers, who was driving, pull his pants down and stick his ass, at them, basically moon them. But this was enough for them to actually careen off the road, into a ditch. Where it caused them, that being Sherry, Summers, and Rose, to be late, for their match at the event that night of where they were going. And it showed that during the reenactment, Medusa and her driving buddies all flipped them off, basically, on the way there. Because they were like, hey, we got through your BS, now we're going to get out of here safe and sound. Hey, here's to you for trying to screw us over. Or whatever. But yeah, they touched upon that. They touched upon the fact that Medusa used that $800 she got from Vern for her first paycheck to actually get markers for her parents, which was pretty cool. But then, oh my gosh, they talked about Bobby Heenan, right? They talked about how much heat Bobby would get in the AWA, and he would obviously get a lot, to the point that someone took a gun out, brought a gun to the arena, and started shooting. And this was during the Vern Gagne, Nick Bockwinkel AWA World Title match, or at least one of them. And they started shooting, trying to hit Bobby, legitimately shoot the guy. And what happened is they hit a woman in the shoulder. I guess she survived. They hit another person, I think she was at the shoulder or the neck, but one of them, but obviously she survived. They hit another person in the shoulder or the hand, and everything. And this was all happening during the match. And nobody knew about it until somebody said something. And what's crazy is nobody caught the person. The person obviously did what they thought they had to do, put the gun away according to the reenactment, and that was it. And that was it. But that's not the but that is not the craziest thing involving Bobby Heenan either. Because Greg Gagne, he didn't really want to talk about this, wasn't sure if he should, but he did anyway. They kind of said, go ahead. They kind of pressured him into doing it. Playfully. They playfully pressured him into talking about it. And basically what happened is Heenan in the AWA was managing Adrian Adonis, right? So what happened is that on, again, that little plane that they bought, one of them anyway, flying to the next town, and it's an hour to the next town, right? And Adrian has to take a massive shit. Excuse my language, Lord, but he has to take a massive shit. So the bathroom's not properly connected in the plane. The plane had a bathroom, but it wasn't connected, properly, the way it should be, or at least in a timely manner to be workable. So Heenan decides, okay, I got an idea, and he gets a black trash bag, and I guess they had on hand to toss trash in, and holds it for Adrian to to pull down his pants and take a dump in. Not realizing that what Adrian's about to do, whatever he ate, let's just say, we all know from experience what will be the end result. And what happened is Adrian basically exploded. They even described it as an explosion, to the point that it went right through the bag and onto Heenan. Parts of it went onto Heenan. And what it was diarrhea. it was shit takwa diarrhea. You know, to quote JR. It was shit takwa, if you will. Massive explosion. And according to, I think it was, who was it? Ganya, I believe. He's like yelling, he's saying that Heenan's just yelling and going like, "Hey, get on me, get on." And I was like, oh my god. So they had to do they had to do a impromptu landing to clean everything up, to get showered and everything. Heenan and Adrian were basically left with the cleanup, to clean up all the crap, literally. So when they got back in there, they think everything looks alright apparently, but they still smell shit. They're like, wait a minute, why does it still smell like shit? And I think it was Mad Dog that looked down, reached down under a chair and pulled out the bag. And then, because Mad Dog's a crazy mofo, sticks his head, opens the bag, sticks his head in it, and sniffs. And basically it's like, that's how you get used to it and everything. You kind of get, well, basically him putting his head in there and then coming out with crap dripping down his face, like he's saying that's how you get used to the smell if you got to travel with it. And I'm like, I was like, oh my god. And they even described it like, yeah, that's why Mad Dog was Mad Dog. He would do crazy stuff like that. But that was like a moment that nobody has ever heard about until now, I'm assuming, because, like I said, WWE didn't even touch upon it with their history on AWA. Yeah, they did talk about DDP's time there, and how he tried to be a wrestler. He tried to wrestle at first at a young age. I think it's a Handsome Dallas Page or something like that, and it didn't work out. So he decided, okay, I'm going to be a manager, because he was at that age where he felt at the time, okay, I'm too old for this. Oh, I'm 31 now. I'm getting too old for this. So Dallas becomes a manager, and he sends in this tape or something like that, where he has all these people around him, and it gets Greg Gagne's and Vern Gagne's attention. They bring him in, and when Vern sees him, like, who are you? And he says, I'm Diamond Dallas Page. I heard you got a position for me as a manager. And according to Dallas, when Vern saw him, he's like, you're the tallest manager I've ever seen. It's like, you can't believe. Because, Dallas was wearing some boots to, enhance his height. But, so Vern's looking at him like, you're the tallest manager I've ever seen. And speaking of Vern, they talked about how he ran his school and how some people would quit within the hour. And they even talked about how he basically went to Ric Flair's home and basically got Rick to get in the car and get back to training, because Rick wanted to quit himself, but Vern obviously saw something in him and said, no, you're not going to quit, you're coming back, you committed to this, you're doing it. And that's what happened. He had to slap basically some sense into him, literally. So yeah, that happened. And they touched upon Hulk Hogan's defection to WWF. And according to Greg, Hulk was scheduled, it was around Christmas time, to be in Minnesota for a match, and he didn't show. And they called him up, and basically he says, Vince is paying me more to stay at home than work for you guys. And this was still at a time, or at least in the waning years, waning years of just handshake agreements. Hulk was like, hey, Vince Jr. is paying me more to stay here. Now, what was interesting is they touched upon the fact that Vince Jr., kind of had an agreement with the new established premium cable company at the time, HBO, to show matches. I think it was HBO, or was it USA? They might have gotten one of them mixed up, because I know WWF was on USA, but did they have a deal with HBO? I can't really tell. But anyway, they made an agreement to where on one of those networks, they would showcase a lot of main event matches. From Hulk Hogan being in AWA, to Championship Wrestling for Florida, to the NWA and stuff like that. But according to Greg, what this really was by Vince was a way to, basically I guess you could say, undermine the territory and, basically showcase the talent that he was going to bring into WWF. In other words, yeah, look at all this great talent from all these other places. Guess what? I'm showing you all this because soon they'll be under my control, be under my roof, or something like that. So it was interesting to find out about that. And then they talk about how Vince wanted to buy, the AWA from Gagne, his territory and all that. And Gagne said, well, let me see what I can talk to my partners, because he had partners across the country because of the territories the AWA would be showcased in. And they talk about one time they were taking Vince to the airport, and basically, according to Gagne, Greg Gagne that is, Vince got out, and as soon as he turns around, he says, "I don't negotiate." Basically stating that he was not about to negotiate maybe a deal with other people, that if he was going to negotiate any deal, it's to get sales, is to get Vern to sell the company to him. That was it. He wasn't going to deal and be partners with all these other people. Essentially, it's essentially what I got from it, if you will. But yeah, overall, the AWA thing was pretty good. They did touch upon the Ken Patera and Mr. Saito situation with McDonald's, and according to Pantera, and he even got a little frustrated with his with his table mates, if you will, even though he kind of played it off, joked around with them a little bit as well. But basically, according to Pantera, it was a young former employee at McDonald's that threw the rock, and he was basically called out for it. He was called out for it. He was basically, looked at as the one that pretty much was in the area, after the teenager after the young man left. So he was pretty much, according to, from what he's saying, pointed out as the culprit. So they came to his, his hotel room where him and Saito were, and they maced him. They maced Saito. They got into a brawl and everything. And you can kind of tell maybe Pantera was fabricating some of this, or over-exaggerately fabricating some of this. I mean, most of it was true, but you can tell there was some exaggerated fabrication. But the end result is they ended up getting like a couple years in prison, both him and Saito. And all over the fact that he was pretty much, from Ken's perspective, his own mouth, framed for something he didn't do. So they touched upon that. They touched upon how the fact that in the early 60s, or late 60s, early 70s, they had this tag team called the Chain Gang that Dick Murdoch, Dick the Bruiser had brought in. And basically they were put into a situation to where literally one of the members had to retire from wrestling because they got shot. Because what happened is they went to an area where there was this bike gang, and this bike gang took offense to them portraying themselves as legitimate bikers on television, and one of the guys in that team got shot. They got they were invited to what they thought would be a party, only to find out it was a setup to basically beat the crap out of them, because a lot of the biker gang members at that time who were there, as part of the setup apparently, didn't like them portraying or making a mockery of what they were part of. So one of the members of the tag team got out of the window, ran towards the river and everything, and was found by some police and all that. The other survived, but he got shot in the leg, and that guy that got shot in the leg, from what I understand, never wrestled again, and they never wrestled as the Chain Gang ever again either. And I don't think the guy that did escape and probably continue wrestling later continued being any kind of biker gimmick at all, from what I can tell. But overall, like I said, I thought this episode for the AWA Bodyslams in the Heartland was really good, because again, it touched upon things that WWF or WWE didn't touch upon in their AWA documentaries, or nobody else ever did. And I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you want to know about stuff that you didn't even know about, that when it came to the AWA to an extent. The next episode they got coming up is on Championship Wrestling from Florida, CWF. I think that's the next one they got. You know, I think that is the next one that they got. It's called Bloodstains in the Everglades. So yeah, that's gonna be the next one next week. And I think the roundtable that they're going to be consisting of there is going to have Kevin Sullivan. You know, it's going to have Kevin Sullivan in there. I'm assuming they're going to touch upon Luna being in there too. So it's going to have Sullivan. It's going to have Steve Kern. It's going to I think it's going to have like I say, it's going to have Steve Kern. It's going to have Kevin Sullivan. It's going to have a bunch of people in there that work that territory. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it, and it comes out on October 25th. So cannot wait to see that. And you know, and again, you got to remember, this is a series where they talk about things that have basically never been covered, you know, in any other documentary or other presentation on the history of, you know, these territories or organizations, if you will, that were in existence. So I cannot wait to see it. I cannot wait for it to come out. Again, you know, there's a lot of things they could touch upon. Like, you know, they're going to touch upon Kevin Sullivan's satanic thing that he tried, satanic group that he put together. Obviously, they got to touch upon the Mike and Eddie Graham. They got to touch upon Abdullah, because I think Abdullah made a name there, as well as Dusty. So it's going to be interesting. I know they got one on Stampede Wrestling coming as well, because Brett's involved in that one. So yeah, cannot wait to see what we get here next week with Bloodstains in the Everglades, the CWF one. But that's all I'm going to say, guys, on my overview of both the second and third episode of Tales from the Territories, the Andy of Kaufman versus Lawler, and CWF Bloodstains in the Everglades. So let me know what your thoughts are, guys, down below. Comment if you like. Live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Super chat, super stickers are open during the live chat. Super thanks after the premiere. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Romer-2, Cash App at BWRoses98, Patreon.com/BWRoses, $1, $3 tier there. BW Roses Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. VENMO at BW Roses for content you can't get here on YouTube. And at my Teespring store as well. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. And until then, I will talk to you all next time.